Write a transcript of the event. I'm going to tell you about something that happened in 2017. I was 7 months pregnant with my daughter at the time, and I was living with my aunt, who was the only person who ever helped me when I needed it. She supported me and my child the entire time, and to be honest, she was the mother I never had because she rarely let me do anything during the prime stage of my pregnancy. However, one day she got a fever, so I had no choice but to drive to the store to get some snacks for my cravings. I promised her that I would be okay because I detest being the damsel in distress. She cautioned me to be careful while I was lying on her bed, so I smiled at her and locked the door behind me before getting into her car and driving down to the Dollar Tree store. About 3 blocks from our house, I pulled up a shopping cart from the corner and began to walk. I was idly browsing aisle after aisle for some snacks when I noticed the chips on the top shelf. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't reach them because of my extra weight. Then, I heard a voice behind me and turned around to see an elderly woman with a kind smile. I smiled back and shifted so she could get the chips for me. After she gave them to me, I smiled once more and said, "Thank you." And she stroked my cheek before looking around incredulously. "I don't know where your hubby is, sweetie." "Oh." And then the child's father, who isn't in the photo, scowled as she saw that I was alone. She then glanced around once more before saying in a worried tone, "You shouldn't wander around alone in this condition, no. My aunt takes care of me, but she fell ill. That's why I had to come here today. So how long have you been living with your aunt? For a few months now, and how are your parents doing?" By this point, I was beginning to feel a little uncomfortable with her questions. When I attempted to move past her, she followed me like my shadow down every aisle and asked me different questions. I answered all of her inquiries about my parents and everything else she asked, and now I realize what a huge mistake that was. But at the time, I thought she was just worried about me. She continued to give me advice and suggestions about how to take care of the baby and me, but what bothered me about her was the way she spoke. She hardly blinked, and her eyes were constantly moving around, watching every move in the Dollar Tree outlet. There weren't many people there, so I grabbed some Juice B boxes when the woman leaned creepily towards me and said, "For your cravings, huh? If I were your aunt, I would have taken way better care of you. You are here alone, and this condition proves otherwise." I attempted to. I ignored her and continued walking in the opposite direction. But the old woman started to act strangely. She asked me out of the blue, "Why don't you come with me?" and kept smiling at me as if it were perfectly normal to say to someone you met in a department store, "Excuse me, I could take good care of you and your baby. I have this big farmhouse on the outskirts. Trust me, you and your baby will have the best life." I turned to leave, but she grabbed my cart and stopped me. She grinned broadly and said, "Okay, let's drive to your place first so you can take all your stuff. I will take you to my place." I was unable to remain composed now. The woman was shocked when I pulled her hand away from my cart, but she backed off a little. "I don't want to live with you. I have my aunt to take care of me. Please leave me alone." Her face went serious when she heard my angry voice. She looked down for a while before looking up at me once more and saying, "But what if something happens to you? Your aunt is not with you now, and life is very uncertain. You know what do you mean? Stay the hell away from me or I'll report you to the cops." I didn't wait a second near her as I was leaving, but I glanced back to make sure she was following me, but she wasn't there. Duration, I was inside the Dollar Tree, but I didn't see her. After checking out, a Dollar Tree employee helped me carry my bag to my car and wished me a good day. She then went back inside, leaving me standing in the empty parking lot. All I wanted to do was drive home as soon as possible. But my panicked mind suddenly gave birth to the urge to urinate because I was pregnant, and it was nearly impossible for me to drive while holding my pee at that point. I had no choice but to finish my business because the public restrooms are at the end of the store, and I didn't want to go in just to see that creepy old lady again. So I used the restroom. After locking my car, I made my way to the modest restroom with 3 toilets in the left-hand corner of the parking lot. There was nobody inside. I went into the first restroom and was using it when I heard the bathroom door open. At first I didn't react because obviously anyone uses these restrooms, but then the footsteps abruptly stopped being alert and afraid. I tried to hear every sound that was happening, but there was nothing but dead silence. I was sweating and still staring at the door when I heard heavy breathing above me. The blood in my veins froze as I slowly raised my eyes to follow the breathing sound. My stomach dropped when I saw the toilet's partition wall next to mine. It was the same old woman from the Dollar Tree, standing on the toilet seat to look at me. I will always remember that moment in my life. Her wide, frightening eyes watched me silently, and she didn't say a word. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. She then said, "You need to come with me. I'll take good care of you and your baby. Please just leave us alone." She then said, "Do you want money? I can give you some money. Keep your freaking money, I want." Your baby saying this. I woke up and screamed for my life. I opened the bathroom door and came out in panic before the elderly woman got off the toilet seat and chased me out of the restroom. It was the most trying time of my life, so I hurried to my A's. The woman behind me laughed uncontrollably. I said, "Come here, I want your baby, and she would take wonderful care of you." Before she could get to me, I managed to get into the car and shut the door. Her hand got in the way, but I slammed the door firmly. I heard bones crack and a painful scream as my car door broke her wrist, but I didn't care anymore. I drove away at full speed while the woman continued to yell. This isn't the end, though, because I started crying. When I got home, my aunt called the police right away to warn them about this woman and everything that had happened to me at the Dollar Tree. The police never located the woman, but a week after the incident, I saw a missing persons report in the newspaper about a PR woman. She went shopping in the same Dollar Tree outlet one afternoon in her late 20s, and nobody has seen her since. Nobody knows what happened to her or her child, and I firmly believe that the eerie elderly woman was involved. Absence. I was around 13 years old when the incident I'm about to share occurred. My parents were divorcing at the time, so things weren't going well at home. We lived in a small neighborhood where I couldn't really make any friends to kill time. I used to sketch a lot and save my pocket money from side jobs to buy various art and craft supplies to indulge my inner amateur artist. The Dollar Tree store was 3 blocks away, next to the gas station on the highway, and I would ride my bike there 2 or 3 times a week. It was a large store with a huge collection of various household materials, and more than that, one time I went there around 3 in the afternoon. I liked this time of day because there weren't many customers, so I parked my bike at the corner and went inside. The cashier was sleeping behind his desk, and I could see that there were probably 2 or 3 people in the room besides me. In front of me were long aisles lined with tall shelves brimming with various items. When I first started looking around the store, the craft and art area featured a purchase. I was so engrossed in my shopping that I didn't notice someone was standing behind me. Then I heard a hiccup, and when I turned around, I saw a man dressed as Jack Sparrow from the well-known Johnny Depp film. Since it was a closed space, there wasn't much space between us, so I moved away from him a little and said, Sorry. I didn't see you there, but I saw you." At first I thought he was just being in character, but based on the way his hiccups appeared, I realized this man was extremely inebriated. His pupils were dilated and I could smell the whiskey on his clothes. "Why are you dressed like Jack?" I asked. I thought I was Jack Sparrow, so I responded with a sarcastic laugh. "Oh, you are laughing so you don't believe me." His eyebrows frowned, and I could tell he felt insulted by my sarcastic laugh. I stood there with an awkward face answering, "You're Captain You Live," demanding, "You are the shittiest Jack Sparrow I've ever seen in my entire life." Sparrow's mouth opened wide in shock as if I had said something unexpected, and he just stared at me, eyes wide, mouth open, and overall very creepy. I turned to leave him, but fortunately he didn't follow me. I walked to the cashier to pay, took a quick look around the store and realized the man wasn't there anymore, and felt relieved. That's when my nightmare started. I remembered exactly where I had parked my bike, and to my surprise it wasn't there. Then, from a distance in the dark parking lot, I heard a burst of spine-tingling laughter, followed by the ring of a bicycle bell. I was adamant that I wasn't going home without my bike, and I trembled as I did. There were several automobiles in the parking lot when I arrived, and the lights there were blinking frantically. It took a while for my eyes to get used to the eerie atmosphere, but what I witnessed made my skin crawl. My bike was parked at the very end of the lot, and Jack Sparrow was sitting on it. I couldn't see his face, but I'm sure he was grinning eerily when he saw me heading there. He yelled, "You need to find yourself a girl, mate," and then he pedaled faster. almost like a bullet was going straight at me. I screamed and started to run for my life. I heard the man laugh like a crazy person, and he was chasing me on my bike. I have no idea why, but I know that if he caught me, he wouldn't let me go unharmed. I started to run down the highway, but fortunately no car was seen there, almost in a panic. Ran in the other direction. The man was riding my bike on the interstate and laughing louder than ever instead of going into the Dollar Tree. He was enjoying frightening the living daylights out of me, and the intense heat was exhausting me. I was getting tired, so I was moving slowly, and I could hear the insane sparrow pedaling faster. I thought I would never be able to outrun him, and I was about to pass out in the middle of the road when I noticed a large truck approaching. The urge to live again blossomed in my heart, and I began to raise and lower my hands in the air while yelling at the truck to stop. I need help stopping. When the truck driver saw me and sounded the horn, I turned around to see that the man had stopped pedaling. He gave me a quick glance before the truck and then back to me again, knowing that the truck would stop for me and that I had nothing to fear. His angry eyes were burning with hatred, and the evil joy left his face. He slowly got off my bike and kicked it to make it fall on the concrete road. My bicycle's bell broke and he fled into the woods. When the truck driver picked me up with my bike, I was completely worn out and drenched in perspiration. When the truck driver dropped me off at my house, I thanked him for his assistance and went straight to my room. I hadn't left the house for nearly a week, and every time I heard a bicycle bell, I begged him to just take me home. I was gasping for air and breathing heavily. The reason I never shared gave me chills. This experience was that nobody ever saw it as a threat. Instead, they thought the strange man dressed like Jack Sparrow was just making jokes. I can't spend a night without having a nightmare about that crazy guy chasing me in a Jack Sparrow while riding my bike. Outfit: I worked as a cashier at Dollar Tree, a well-known dollar store, for about 6 months a few years ago. After a few months, I would occasionally work alone because we were constantly looking to hire more staff. But fortunately, it was never too bad. I mostly worked night shifts. The store was in a quiet area until we closed at 10 p.m. One quiet night I worked alone. It was raining a little and sprinkled intermittently, which I noticed because the front of the store, where the checkout lanes were, had windows looking out into the parking lot. After 8 p.m., we barely had any customers. The rain must have kept them inside. I kept myself occupied by doing small chores, organizing things, and using my phone. Even though the final hour always seemed to drag on forever, it was comforting to know that I would be returning home this evening after 9 p.m. We had no customers, which was okay with me because I always got a little anxious as the lone employee on duty when someone arrived late at night. However, at around 9:15, a car pulled into the wet parking lot. Up until that point, my car had been the only one there. It was an older, dark blue 4-door sedan, and it parked in the closest spot. A man who was a little larger than average got out of the car. He was wearing a blue raincoat and a gray and red baseball cap, vehicle, and went to the shop. After entering, he proceeded down one of the aisles. I remained by the register at ECAY, my check lane, and used my phone for a few minutes before I noticed the man moving slowly toward the front of the store. He didn't appear to be carrying anything, so he just looked around. I looked over and made eye contact with him for a brief moment to be friendly, and I smiled and said hello. The man simply looked away, then slowly walked to the exit. After that, he left the store, and I watched him get back into his car and drive away. By this point, it was around 9:30. I was once more alone. After making sure everything was in order, I made the decision to clean the floors so I could depart by 10 p.m. Fortunately for me, no one came to shop as I did, so I stayed in business until around 9:50. After that, I returned to my check lane and spent the next 10 minutes on my phone, watching the time every minute to ensure that I could close at 10 at 9:58 p.m. I got a bad feeling when I saw a car pull into the parking lot, but then I realized that it was the same vehicle that had just arrived. Since it was an older and somewhat unusual-looking car, there was no mistake. The man who had been there about 30 minutes ago returned, but this time he parked directly next to my car instead of close to the store. I had parked my car a little further away and against a curb, and the man parked on the side of the car closer to me, so my car was mostly out of my line of sight. I thought this was a little odd, and I came up with the idea that perhaps the man had dropped something on the ground while he was in the store and returned to get it. I'm not sure why, but that was one possible explanation that crossed my mind. The man did not exit his car as I had anticipated, instead remaining inside his car with the engine running at 10. It was time for me to lock the doors, so I walked over to them while keeping my eyes on the car in the parking lot. I was a little worried that he might get out when I got close to the doors or something, but he didn't, so I made it to the front doors and locked them. I then went to the back area to clock out of my shift, hoping and sort of expecting to see that the man was gone because he could clearly see that we were now closed and I had just locked up. But the car remained there, as if he were still inside. Now I had a terrible feeling about why he chose to park directly next to me when there were a dozen closer spaces and why he was here at all. I considered simply walking outside, heading to my car, and leaving. But my gut told me not to. Instead, I waited inside my check lane, checking my phone every minute or so to see if the man had left. After 30 minutes, it was 10:30 at night, and the man was still parked directly next to my car. I decided to text my best friend Brina, who lived fairly close by, and after explaining the situation, she offered to come and pick me up in her car, so I accepted. The front doors. The man and my car were much farther away on the backside of the parking lot. She told me she was leaving, and 5 minutes later I saw her car pull into the lot. I went to the front of the store, and as she pulled up, she stopped for a moment, let me get in the passenger seat, and then drove off. Fortunately, the man did not follow us in his car, so we drove back to Brenda's house and then we went back to the Dollar Tree. A short while later, the man's car was gone, so I was able to get into my car and drive home. After that experience, I truly wonder what the man was doing. Was he waiting for me to get to my car, and did he have something planned? I'm relieved I didn't have to learn. I started working at my neighborhood grocery when I was 16. It was a decent job, and the work wasn't too difficult. Since I lived in a pleasant area of town, the most of the customers were older and wealthier families. There were a few incidents, but they were generally either angry customers or shoplifting attorneys. I worked there for almost 3 years until June 24, 2008, when I was 8 hours into my 8-hour shift that ended at 11. The first few hours went well, but at 6 o'clock it began to rain. Not just a drizzle, but a downpour, and when it came time for my meal break, I discovered that I had left my wallet in my car. I made the big mistake of not getting an umbrella from Lost and Found and instead just running for it. I was only 10 seconds from the front doors, but by the time I got back inside, I was completely soaked. I bought a snack and went upstairs to dry off. About 30 minutes later, I went back downstairs, still soaked, and I noticed that the store was almost empty. I walked towards customer service and saw only 1 or 2 customers. I was surprised to see so few people at 7:30, but I assumed that most people didn't want to go outside in the rain. I went back into the check stand and began talking with my coworker Maria. We talked about her kids, and most of them realized that they were out of necessities like milk or toilet paper. Occasionally the lights would flicker, a little, although that was most likely only the storm. I heard some rumbling in the distance, but it was fairly far away. I said, "I'll refill the shelves tomorrow." I went to the shopping racks and looked, outside a distance from the store, and I saw 2 dogs eating out of a dumpster that had been knocked over. Behind them, there was a large bush area, and the dogs were moving, not randomly, but slowly and jerkily, until they turned back and began growling at the bush. At that moment, Maria yelled, "Joanna, come and help me." I muttered, "What the hell?" and walked to her, confused. The dogs kind of disappeared into thin air, and I was fairly certain I saw something coming out of that bush. But it was moving so quickly by the time we contacted Victor, our night cleaning guy, and he arrived and began wiping the floors after we had returned to our seats after restacking the aisles. It was 15 minutes past closing time. Victor, who also happened to be our handyman, lived in a small garage behind the supermarket. He came mopping the floor next to my stand and said, "Oh, you look a little worried, but it's nothing, I'm just tired." I said, "Okay, I'll make it quick then, thank you." I started packing up my belongings and Victor went to finish his work. Victor was always kind to me, We dated for a while. As I came out and stood by the exit to smoke, I noticed that the highway was deserted, encircled by woods. The streetlights added to the atmosphere. Flicker. My pulse stopped beating when I saw two enormous yellow eyes looking at me from that bush. "You left your phone on the desk." Joanna Victor was shouting for me when I turned around, so I hurried inside as fast as I could. Just as I was closing the door, a massive lightning strike struck, and the lights went out. What a night. I'll light some candles. Lighting the candles and keeping them on stands, Maria stated. The silence was broken when Victor sat down by a window and started a cigarette. "What did you say?" "Something is out there," Maria inquired, and I replied, "I believe something ate those dogs because something is outside." "Or Joanna, I'm not sure what you're saying." "What dogs, guys, believe me, there is some evil out there. Some sort of creature with eyes like a cat, but they're huge. So it's probably a cat you spooked yourself." Victor said, "No, Victor, I know what I saw. Fine. I'll go check it out. Don't." Victor took his mop in one hand and a flashlight in the other, and he went out with Maria following him because I had no choice but to follow them. We came out and I pointed to the bush. Victor poked the bush with the end of the mop, then threw his flashlight on it. As soon as he did that, my blood froze, and a partial head of a cat-like creature could be seen from the bush. Its eyes were watching us while its sharp the ears protruded like antlers. "Hey, kitty, are you hungry? What the devil is that?" We all went numb with fear as Maria yelled, "Don't get too close to it." But then the power came back on, and the large lamppost above the bush flashed on. Behind the bush was a huge animal that was almost as big as a lion, but it had a very slim body without fur, like a sphinx cat, but strangely had hair on its face and a thin layer of fur around its neck. It had a huge, drooling jaw that opened and licked its lips with its enormous teeth. It was a four-legged animal, but it was standing on 2 feet like a werewolf. In terror, Victor flung the mop at it and fled to the shop. We entered and shut the glass door, but I knew it wouldn't have prevented this beast from killing us. It ate our colleague, wiped the blood off its lips with one leg, and slowly vanished into the darkness of the woods. The police looked into Maria's death as a missing person case, but her body was never found and never will be. I just hope that none of you ever see that creature in your lifetime. I did the same thing, but before Maria could flee, the creature threw its sharp claws on her flesh and grabbed her by the other hand. It was terrifying to watch, but there was nothing I could have done to save her. Life a few months prior, I was purchasing at my neighborhood dollar store. I frequently shop there and acquire a variety of stuff that I need, so I don't mind that the quality is low because I save a lot of money. However, I don't get just anything, and the things I do get are all satisfactory to me. It's incredibly convenient because my apartment is close to the dollar shop, which I can walk to. The dollar store is smaller and never very busy, so I decided to go there one late Saturday afternoon to pick up a few things. It was a quick 10-minute walk from my apartment, and when I arrived that afternoon, I saw only a few other people strewn about the place. I picked up a basket and started shopping, but I didn't go very far before an unexpected incident happened. When I got to the store's back corner, I noticed a man standing there openly drinking a beer. It was quite strange and funny to see the man just standing there drinking from a beer bottle. He wasn't shopping, but he was dressed a little strangely, in a green sweater and dress pants. He didn't appear homeless, but he also didn't look very clean or sharp. I could also see another open beer bottle hanging out of his pocket. I was shopping nearby when I saw that the man wasn't looking at me, but someone else was walking by him and giving him a strange look. I became a little inquisitive and occasionally glanced over to check if the guy was still there. Since alcohol wasn't sold in the dollar store, I assumed the man brought it in with him shortly after. He was upset when he heard a store employee approach him and tell him that he was not allowed to be drinking there. There was a brief argument before he stormed off, but I suppose he could have been because it seemed strange to walk into a store with a beer like that. I finished my shopping and went to check out, getting maybe 5 things, and the cashier put them all in a bag. After paying, I left and started to walk home. I made it about halfway back and was on the sidewalk when I saw the man up ahead, the one who had been drinking in the store. He looked really irate now, and he was standing by a mailbox sipping one of his beers. I noticed that he was staring at me as I approached him, approximately 10 feet distant. The man's eyes were still on me, so I smiled and asked him how he was doing. He continued to look angry, so I decided to just walk past him without saying anything more. I was shocked, so I decided to just walk away, but as I did, I heard his footsteps approaching mine. I told him that I was just trying to get home and didn't want any trouble, but he looked even more angry. I told him that I didn't want any trouble, and he started cursing at me once more. I assumed that he must have been intoxicated because his speech wasn't slurred, but there was no other explanation for his unpredictable behavior. I turned to continue walking home, but he grabbed my shoulder and pulled me back, so I jerked away and started running. The man started chasing after me, but he wasn't particularly quick. I had never felt unsafe in my neighborhood before, but after that incident, I realized I need to be a little more cautious. I'm not sure what the man's problem was, but I hope not to see him again. I ran all the way back to my apartment and got inside. Fortunately, the man stopped chasing me just before my building. Once more, I adore visiting Dollar Tree. My family doesn't have a lot of money, so this is one of the only places where we can go together and buy a lot of things. Even if we don't buy anything, it's still a great family outing because the kids enjoy themselves and we don't have to worry about money that day. Thomas, my husband, had recently started a new job, so he invited us all. Sees what we want. When we entered the store, our 2 children were very excited. Before we could ask them to stay with us, they ran to the toy section, where Martin, our oldest son, bought a helicopter and Gwen grabbed a warplane. It was obvious that they had agreed to buy similar toys before they came in, which amused me a little. I was happy for them when Thomas chose a screwdriver, and I was happy that I would finally be able to buy a picture frame that I had seen a few weeks prior. It may seem like a simple item, but when you're struggling to put food on your table, every dollar counts. I went to get it at the end, and there it was, the last one in the store. Imagine placing it next to my bed. I was going to hang a picture of our family and look at it every night before I went to sleep. I went cheerfully as a child to get it, and as soon as I did, a woman pushed me and violently pulled it out of my hands. Hey, I saw it first. The woman was big, stocky, and athletic, and even though she was wearing gym clothes, you could tell that it was brand-name clothing and that she was wealthy. I saw it first, so how dare you push me like that? You go make your husband lunch first. Treat me with respect. I'm a person just like you. My issue is cooking for. It's amazing that your kids aren't in a zoo and that your husband doesn't do the cleaning. You should be grateful that I touched you while you were wearing your supermarket clothing. She smiled broadly and said it maliciously. There were limitations to my patience. I think of myself as a very composed woman who always strives to reach a consensus, yet I lose my temper when someone mistreats my family. I was so angry that I smacked her, grabbed the picture frame from her hand, turned around and walked away, saying a few final words to her in front of Thomas and my kids, who were shocked. Oh, and don't go shopping at Downer Dollar Tree if you're extremely wealthy. The woman simply stopped, her face flushed like a tomato, and she began taking deep breaths. Growing more irate with each second that goes by, the woman had changed, from being a random Karen to a furious gorilla who could attack us at any time. I simply joined my family and continued walking. Wow, nice to meet you. Angela Thomas said, Shut up. I guess the witch took it too hard because she left her shopping basket and left. As I turned around, I verified what Thomas had said. From one moment to the next, the woman was just gone. She had done a lot of shopping, but she had taken nothing with her. She definitely took your slap to the heart. Thomas replied, Yeah, it's for the better. As we paid for our belongings, I looked up to see her looking at us from outside, furious and still crimson. She was probably one of those affluent girls who no one ever put in her place. She needed a reality check. I told Thomas that I was breathing heavily and that perhaps we should get ready to confront her on the way out. But she had already left when he looked up. We hurried to the car without bumping into anyone and got in, ready to leave with our purchases, but something was off. The car started, but it wouldn't move. What could be wrong? Thomas, I believe someone had ruptured the car's tires outside of it. The woman from before was furious and was bashing all over our car in her rage. Was not attempting to enter. She intended to wreck the car while we were inside. How dare you touch me with your dirty, repulsive hand? I'll kill you and your cockroach family. Please leave us alone. My kids haven't done anything wrong. I've had enough. I don't care that she's a woman, I'm going to stop her. Thomas stormed out of the car and went to her. He was about to say something when the woman hit him in the knee with her iron pipe and electrocuted him with a taser gun. When Thomas fell, she stomped on his face and rubbed her foot like she was killing a cockroach. She had a crazy, obsessive expression on her face and was obviously enjoying the moment. I quickly rushed out of the car to stop her, but she had great reflexes and stopped me before slamming her iron pipe into my abdomen as I fell on the ground, knee laughing as well. The woman had returned with a bucket of gasoline, which she was pouring into the car with the children inside. I never really cared for that awful frame, and I hate families like you, especially the kids. Thomas was trying to crawl as fast as he could to stop her, but he was a little further behind. When I saw her pull out the lighter, I knew everything was lost and there was no way I was going to make it in time. Thomas and I were both sore on the ground, but fortunately she was far away. We started to get up and screamed loudly, pulled the kids out. By the time we realized it, the place was packed with people. There weren't many people in the Dollar Tree that day, but the noise was enough to let everyone know. The police came a short while later and arrested the woman who was acting like a savage animal. The girl's family offered us a sizable sum of money to not file charges against her, but we declined because our story was public knowledge. Because neither of us could work, we weren't going to live a lavish lifestyle, but we would be much more comfortable because of the people who knew our story. On the other hand, the woman lost her lawsuit and was disinherited by the family who wanted to disown her previously, but in order to avoid starvation upon her release from prison, she will need to work for the first time.